Hello everybody. Welcome on the webinar about what's new in MidPoint 4.4 called Tesla. My name is Katarína Bolemant, and I will walk you through the recent news. Webinar is divided into logical blocks. At the beginning, we will look at the results from midScale project. After that, features and improvements added in Tesla will be introduced. We will briefly go also through the deprecations, removals, and supported platforms. The last but not least part of the webinar will be focused to introduce what's coming next in the release 4.5, which name will be Nightingale. The last year, we focused all the development forces to deliver two releases, Faraday and Tesla, which were influenced by the project called midScale. midScale was a project which received funding from the European Union's Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Program under the NGA Trust. Main goal for midScale project was to improve scalability of MidPoint so it will be able to scale up to tens of millions of identities. Different issues were identified, which we tried to solve during the development of Faraday and Tesla. Following are the key results we've achieved. Scalability of MidPoint was improved at least by one order of magnitude, enabling deployment beyond millions of managed identities. According to the results shown on the pictures, we believe that MidPoint can handle deployments with millions of identities routinely, and that the deployments of tens and even hundreds of millions of identities are possible. Visibility, diagnostics, and reliability of MidPoint were improved, making long-term maintenance of large-scale deployments feasible. Improved performance and user experience of MidPoint user interface, making management of massive user bases efficient. And how did we achieve it? Well, easily. We identified the problems and fixed them. But let's go back what Tesla brings. MidPoint 4.4, called Tesla, is a second LTS release with a support period lasting 3 years. First time, there is a possibility to directly upgrade to Tesla from 2 previous releases, last feature release Faraday Update 2, and LTS release Gutenberg Update 4. During the Tesla development, we invested time to implement new native repository based on PostgreSQL database, rework the task management, and redesign and re-implement significant part of the graphical user interface. Let's have a look on the features coming with Tesla in more detail. One of the biggest tasks targeted for Tesla was new native repository implementation based on PostgreSQL database. Since beginning, MidPoint has come with support for different databases such as PostgreSQL, Oracle DB, MS SQL Server, and so on. It was achievable by MidPoint's flexible design and usage of object relational mapping framework Hibernate. At that time, we expected mid-sized deployments and didn't even dream about bigger deployments managing millions of identities. But during the past 10 years, the world has changed and so did the requirements, and we needed to adapt. With primary design for DB schema and decision to use Hibernate, it was hard to do miracles. Therefore, we decided to start with brand new implementation based on one selected database, which is PostgreSQL. Using one specific database allows us to utilize the native features better. We have also more control over the operation or SQL queries produced. DB schema for native PostgreSQL database was designed with scalability in mind. Of course, there are few differences in respect to the generic repository implementation. When migrating to native repository implementation, you need to keep in mind that the UID format for object identifier is now required. Even though it was designed like this since the beginning, it was never enforced. Native repository implementation, however, enforced it. Serialized objects stored, for example, in full object column, are by default stored in JSON format, which should reduce the space used. Along with the implementation improvements for storing midpoint-related objects such as users, roles, services, and other configuration objects, storage for audit was also touched. Even though DB schema for audit wasn't significantly changed, since 4.4, audit tables are ready for partitioning. We believe partitioning might be very useful, especially in large deployments with huge audit records and can help, for example, with audit cleanup. In favor with native repository implementation, we decided to deprecate support for others' generic repository implementations. They can be still used. However, any improvements and optimizations will be implemented only for the native repository implementation. Therefore, we recommend migrating existing deployments to use native repository implementation as soon as possible. To better fit in modern world of deployments, we needed to review and refresh task management. The main goals for Tesla were to simplify the process of defining new tasks and to bring better support for autoscaling. Simplifications of new task definition brought massive schema cleanup, a new way of structuring tasks called activities. Activities represent the work that should be done. Usually, they consist of definition of actions, what should be done, set of objects on which the action should be executed, if and how the action should be distributed. For example, should it be multi-threaded or multi-noded? And also, it specifies how should be error processed and reported. Introduction of activities also brings incompatible changes. In real world, it means that a non-simple task, for example, partition task or multi-noded tasks, have to be migrated to use the activity structure. Others, simple tasks should work correctly. However, we recommend to migrate them as well, since the graphical user interface was adapted to the new activity structure as well. But don't worry, MidPoint Studio is here, prepared to help you with the migration of your tasks. This is a simple example of the task before 4.4. As you can see in the example, in previous versions, tasks were defined by using many of the extension attributes, which led to the chaos which attribute should be used with which task. A few improvements to differentiate attributes for tasks were added in MidPoint 4.1 when the task pages were reworked and archetypes were applied. However, this couldn't help while defining tasks manually, for example, in Studio. In Tesla, you can use activities and the definition of task could look like the example shown. And finally, after importing such a task to MidPoint, navigating to task details, you will see the screen shown in the picture. And what about auto-scaling improvements? Imagine the situation when new academic year is about to start, and you need to provision a lot of new students. You have MidPoint running in cluster with 2 nodes, because usually it is enough. You will start with onboarding process for new students, and after some time you realize that you would like to speed up the process by adding another MidPoint node into a cluster. You would probably expect that the MidPoint will react to this change and spread the task execution on the new node in the cluster. And you would also probably expect that if any of the node is shut down, MidPoint tasks will survive and will continue to work without any problems. And your expectations are correct for MidPoint 4.4. One of the achievements with task management in Tesla is better support for autoscaling. But it is not only one cluster-related improvement. Tesla brings also full support for thresholds in cluster environment, better error reporting, and better progress in statistic reporting. Experiences with older MidPoint versions, when the progress or statistics reporting might have seemed absurd, are gone. The whole mechanism was redesigned and re-implemented in Tesla to give a more sense and more precise numbers. To bring also better experience while configuring multi-noded tasks, there is a possibility to run backend analysis before the task run. So you can check if your configuration has sense and will behave as expected. Another significant change in Tesla is related to graphical user interface design. The primary reason for changing the design was to improve the user experience, along with bringing more flexibility and more possibilities for customization according to the customer's needs. We focus mainly on details pages for objects such as users, roles, services, and so on. Examples of what everything can be configured are shown in the picture. For example, you can customize summary panel. Since Tesla, it is even possible to do a customization in archetypes, so each archetype object can have different summary panel. At the left side, where the details navigation menu is shown, there are many arrows pointing to what can be configured. For example, don't you like the icon we chose for assignments? Okay, change it to the icon which will be more suitable according to you. Don't you like the label projections because it is misleading and not very clear for the users? Never mind, change it to accounts or whatever you would like. Do you think there is a lot of information which are not needed for end users, such as history, triggers, or anything else? Yes, you might be right, so hide them. There are many other possibilities how you can customize details page. What and how is shown to your users. If you don't like default panels we use, change them, extend them, implement yours, and just tell MidPoint to use them. Or customize the submenu of the navigation details menu for assignment menu, such as in the picture. In this customization, only roles and license assignments are available for the user to see. MidPoint has had quite rich graphical user interface customization options, which were advanced to a new level with Tesla. So don't be afraid and start to play with it. After summing up, since Tesla, there is a flexible and powerful mechanism to customize graphical user interface. There is a new possibility to adapt summary panel in archetypes, possibility to use virtual containers on different panels, not only the basic one. It is even possible to create separated link from details navigation menu pointing to the virtual container. Virtual containers can even be merged with default MidPoint containers, such as properties on default panel, and the default behavior of properties panel can be therefore modified. For example, it can be hidden, collapsed by default, renamed, and so on. Since Tesla, most of the tables can be customized. For example, you can add another columns to assignment tables, shadow table, and so on. It is also possible to define which panel will be shown as a default one after opening details page. For example, in the picture, there is a live synchronization task details page where the default panel is set to show work definition. To be able to provide such a flexibility, we introduced a new configuration option called panel. In the picture, wrapped with red line, this is an example for the panel configuration. One role of panel configuration is to define details navigation menu. You can influence what will be shown and where it will be shown. For example, what will be the label for the link in details navigation menu, and which icon should be used? Where should it be placed? At the beginning, in the middle? Should it be a second link? Is the link in details navigation menu on tab level, or should it be placed to any submenu? And second part of the panel configuration then tells which specific panel should be shown. For example, is it a form-based panel or should it be a table? As you probably guessed, we couldn't have avoided incompatible changes. Doing incompatible changes is always a hard decision as it has usually impact on end users. However, at some point, you must do it to move to another level. The most important warning concerns deployments with object forms used. These are not supported with the new design at all. To be able to migrate the configuration step by step, there is still possibility to switch MidPoint graphical user interface to use the old design. However, it is recommended to migrate your configuration as soon as possible to fit with the new design. Example usages can be found in the documentation for admin GUI configuration available at Evolveum docs. Another incompatible change introduced by changes for configuration of graphical user interface is related to the identifier attribute. Identifier attribute is used to identify specific feature configured in admin GUI configuration. Since the configuration for details pages can be scattered across different objects, such as part of the configuration being in system configuration, part of the configuration in role, and part of the configuration in archetype, to be able to merge all these configurations, we need somehow know that they are intended to be merged. Identifier attribute is used as a unique identifier according to which we can merge these configurations. Also, configuration for virtual sections was moved one level down, so we can now know on which specific panel which virtual section should be shown. The old way of configuring virtual sections should work. However, it won't be possible to say on which specific panel the virtual section should be shown. In addition to these major changes, Tesla brings more. One of the improvements in Tesla is better support for archetypes. We decided to deprecate support for using subtype and encourage you to migrate to archetypes and enjoy all the benefits of them. More specifically, in Tesla, we added support for archetype personas and auxiliary archetypes. In previous versions, only one archetype could be assigned to the object at the same time. And it will be always true while using only structural archetypes. However, Tesla introducing auxiliary archetypes enables the usage for more of them at once. Auxiliary archetypes can be used only with combination with structural archetypes. As example, you can imagine a situation that you have a person, which can be a teacher, and you have a person, which can be a student. But there might be a person that is a student and teacher at the same time. In MidPoint world, it would mean that you need one structural archetype for person and two auxiliary archetypes for student and teacher. Then you can combine the usage of archetypes. For example, for the teacher, it will be a combination of person structural archetype plus teacher auxiliary archetype. If the person is student at the same time, then we will assign structural person archetype and both teacher and student auxiliary archetypes. In Tesla, we definitely removed all support and everything related to Jasper reports. All reports must be migrated to the native MidPoint reporting mechanism. We believe we covered everything that was used by Jasper-based reports in MidPoint, and that the migration to native reporting will bring more flexibility and more comfortable way for using the reporting at all. Along with reporting, dashboards were slightly improved too. Maybe worth to mention is support for asynchronous dashboards, where the data are not calculated on the fly, but you can specify a task that will pre-calculate the data in advance. Since Tesla, individual mappings can be enabled or disabled as needed. For example, imagine the situation that you need to disable all the outbound mappings to target system. To do it in previous versions, you would need to delete or comment out the mappings. In Tesla, New option for enabling or disabling mapping was added, so the mappings can be kept, and you need only set enable property to false or true, respectively. Support for connector autoloading was added. It means that in case you need to connect new resource using non-bundled connector, you can do it with MidPoint up and running. MidPoint will scan connectors directory in MidPoint home, and if anything new is found, it will process it and create everything that needed. Autoloading works only for creating new connector instances. It is not able to deal with decommissioning. As in every release, also during the development of Tesla, we did some internal code cleanups and refactorings. Part of them resulted to factoring out Prism and Schrödinger to separated projects. With cleanups and refactorings, hand in hand comes deprecations and removals of old, dead, unsupported features and platforms. Tesla is not different. With native repository implementation, deprecation for old generic repository implementation came. Please consider migration to the native repository as soon as possible. We also removed support for HQL queries used for audit reports and dashboards related to audit. Object type, employee type, role type, org type, and service type were removed as well. They were deprecated for a long time, and previously they were replaced with subtype. Since Tesla, it is even recommended to migrate the usage of subtype to archetypes, as the support for subtype is also deprecated and will be probably removed soon. Before upgrading to Tesla, please use Ninja to verify your configuration files if they don't contain anything marked for removal in 4.4, as all the elements targeted to removal in 4.4 were actually removed. For full list of deprecations, removals, and incompatible changes, please see full release notes. MidPoint is known to work well with the following platforms. For production deployment, Linux operating system is supported. For testing, proof of concept, and demonstrations, also other operating systems can be used, but they are not supported for production use. MidPoint was tested with OpenJDK 11 and OpenJDK 17, where the preferred and recommended version is OpenJDK 17. Explicit deployment of WAR file to web container is deprecated, and standalone deployment should be used instead. Support for generic databases, including support for Oracle DB, MS SQL Server, and all PostgreSQL implementation is deprecated, and it is recommended to migrate to native PostgreSQL repository implementation, where the tested and supported versions are 14 and 13. Migration guide was prepared as a part of the Tesla release. The steps are as follows. Upgrade to 4.4 using original repository. The standard upgrade process applies. It is possible to upgrade to 4.4 from latest LTS update release 4.0.4 and latest feature update release 4.3.2. Then, export existing data using Ninja. Initialize native repository and change the MidPoint configuration to use the native repository. Import previously exported data back to MidPoint using Ninja. Start MidPoint with new configuration and continue with all the migration with MidPoint up and running. And so what are the plans for MidPoint 4.5 Nightingale? So we are planning to improve the algorithm for identity matching to be able to support also human interaction during the correlation process. There will be also notification improvements, and we are planning to add support for failover to LDAP connector. We are also working on new authentication module to support OpenID Connect. And there will be also improvements for graphical user interface, mainly regarding the search and case management. We are we also want to try to upgrade admin LTA template. At least we want to investigate it and see what everything has to be changed. And as a last here, we are going to fully support async query language. It means that also expressions will be supported since 4.5. We realized that there was a lot of changes in Tesla. Therefore, we are preparing other webinars to help you with the migration and configuration in Tesla. We will start with the webinar about native repository implementation, where my colleague Richard Richter will explain in more detail why we decided to do it and what benefit it has. Then Anton Tkačík will help you with upgrading MidPoint, and also the part of the webinar will be the migration to new native repository. Webinar about tasks led by Pavel Mederli will explain and show new task structures and how they work. Then there will be a webinar about customizing graphical user interface led by me. And the last planned webinar for now will be about native reports, how it is possible to migrate Jasper-based reports and how the native reports works, what are the options, and so on. This webinar will be led by my colleague Lukáš Škublik. Thank you for your time. If you are interested in more details about what everything was done during the MidScale project and during the Tesla development, please see Evolveum docs, and also follow us on our social media for further information. Thank you. If you have any question, you can ask now.